It all started with a letter. A yellowed sheet written in crooked handwriting that arrived unexpectedly at Lena's house. I remember the day she showed me the envelope. She, with her impeccable Gothic style, seemed more intrigued than alarmed. But that was her way. Always searching for mystery, always drawn to darkness. Lena was different. Her jet black hair fell in straight strands down to her waist, contrasting with her pale, almost translucent skin. Her eyes, framed by smoky makeup, seemed like bottomless pits, always pensive, always slightly sorrowful. That afternoon, she wore a black velvet dress, fitted at the torso and with sleeves that spread like raven's wings. Around her neck, she had an onyx pendant shaped like a teardrop, and on her wrists, a series of lace and leather bracelets. Her appearance wasn't an act. Lena was goth incarnate, a living enigma in a gray city. "It's a chain letter?" she said as she held the paper carefully, as if afraid it would crumble in her hands. The message was simple. Reply to this letter or face the consequences. If you choose to respond, follow the instructions that will be sent. I laughed, as anyone would. "It's just nonsense. Throw it away," I told her. But Lena didn't. A few days later, I got a message from her. I replied to the letter, she wrote. I couldn't help it. I felt like I had to. That's when things started happening. A few days after she sent the response, her friend Angela, a classmate from university, was found dead in her apartment. The official diagnosis was a heart attack, something extremely rare for a 22-year-old. Lena was devastated, but there was something else. Fear. "Do you think it's related to the letter?" I asked when we met at a cafe. She nodded, biting her black painted lip. "I know it is. Since I replied, I feel like something is around me, like I'm being watched, like it's waiting." Over time, the deaths continued. First, Carlos, her upstairs neighbor, died in an inexplicable accident, falling down the stairs. Then Marta, a childhood friend, crashed her car into a tree on a straight road. Every time someone close to Lena died, her expression grew darker. "I'm sure it's the letter," she told me one day as we walked through a park blanketed with autumn leaves. She wore a long black wool cloak with a hood that barely revealed her face. "It's like they're paying for my mistake." "Why don't you report it?" I suggested. She looked at me with a bitter smile. "And what would I say? That a letter is killing the people I care about? No one would understand." Lena became obsessed with solving the mystery. She confessed to me that she'd received a second message after replying to the letter. It was even more cryptic. "Find my body, and the chains will break." That was the first time I accompanied her to the cemetery. Lena had become a shadow of herself, thinner, paler, as if the weight of the deaths was draining the life from her. That night, she wore a black lace dress that seemed to meld with the darkness, tall boots with metal buckles, and a velvet cloak that made her look like a figure out of a horror story. The cemetery was deserted, shrouded in thick fog that muffled all sound. Lena carried a small flashlight, but its beam barely illuminated the names on the old headstones. "What exactly are we looking for?" I asked, feeling the cold seep through my coat. "I don't know," she replied without looking at me. "Just something." We spent hours walking among the graves, stopping to examine names that meant nothing to us. Lena murmured incomprehensible things, as if speaking to someone I couldn't see. "Are you okay?" I asked, but she didn't answer. The visits to the cemetery became frequent. Each time I saw her, Lena seemed more obsessed, more consumed by something I couldn't understand. She began carrying a journal where she jotted down names, dates, and strange symbols. "I think I'm close," she told me one day. Her lips were chapped, and her eyes gleamed feverishly. Close to what? To her. She never told me who she meant, but I knew she was talking about the letter. It was on an especially cold night that Lena finally found what she was looking for. We were in an abandoned section of the cemetery, where the gravestones were moss-covered and nearly illegible. Here, she said, pointing to a nameless grave. It bore only a date, 1876. What does it mean? I asked. She knelt, placing her hands on the cold stone. This is where she is. I know it. She pulled a small knife from her bag and began digging. I tried to stop her, but her determination was unshakable. Suddenly, she stopped. There was something in the dirt, an old, rotting wooden box. Lena carefully opened it. Inside was a yellowed piece of paper, identical to the letter she had received. It's her, she whispered as the wind began to howl. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream filled the air. Lena collapsed, and for a moment I thought she was dead. But then, with a shuddering breath, she opened her eyes. It's over, she said in a voice barely above a whisper. Lena never spoke about what happened that night. I didn't push her, though I knew something had changed in her. The death stopped, but the Lena I knew never truly returned. Now, every time I pass the cemetery, I feel an unsettling presence, as though something is watching me from the shadows. And though I've never said it out loud, I'm certain Lena left part of herself behind that night, with that forgotten grave.
That Friday seemed like any other night. We had decided to meet at my house, as we often did, to chat and share a pizza. We were a close-knit group of friends, bonded for years. Among us was Hiro, a peculiar guy, always drawn to the spiritual, the unknown, things most of us found too strange to take seriously. But that night, Hiro showed us something none of us were prepared to face. The evening began calmly. We gathered around the table, the pizza arrived on time, and the conversations flowed as usual. Hiro was quieter than usual, but we didn't think much of it. He said he'd had an exhausting day at work and just needed to relax. But soon, he started sweating and complaining of a sharp headache. "Are you okay?" I asked, setting my glass down on the table. "I just need a moment," he replied in a strained voice, getting up from the table. We watched as he headed to the master bedroom, presumably to rest for a bit. Minutes later, we heard something odd. At first, it was a faint murmur, barely audible, but it soon turned into laughter. A laughter that was anything but human, deep, guttural, and as if it came from someone else entirely. We froze. "What the hell?" one of my friends muttered, staring toward the hallway. A chill ran down my spine. Something was terribly wrong. I stood up to check on him, but halfway down the hall, the laughter stopped abruptly. For a moment, the silence was so heavy it felt as if even the air had stopped moving. I cautiously opened the bedroom door, and what I saw left me speechless. Hiro stood in the center of the room, swaying from side to side with strange, puppet-like movements. His face was tense, and though his eyes were open, his pupils had vanished, leaving only a milky white.
Curse to you.
He began laughing again, that same unnerving, otherworldly laughter that seemed to emanate from somewhere dark and unfathomable. "Hiro!" I shouted, but he didn't respond. I bolted back to the living room, trembling. My wife and the others stared at me, expecting an explanation. But before I could say anything, Hiro emerged from the hallway. He walked slowly, dragging his feet, as if each step required immense effort. "He wants to talk to you," he said, pointing a shaky finger at me. My wife went pale as paper. No one said a word, but I felt I couldn't refuse. I returned to the bedroom, shale, even though every instinct screamed at me to stay away. Inside, Hiro stood by the window. When he heard me enter, he turned slowly. His face was eerily serene, almost as if he no longer belonged to the living world. He walked toward me with deliberate steps. When he stopped in front of me, he let out a low growl and uttered words that haunt me to this day. "This is my house." The room instantly grew cold. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. Without warning, Hiro dropped to his knees before me. My body was paralyzed as he grabbed my feet and kissed them with a strange reverence, as if enacting some ancient ritual. Then he raised a hand and placed it over my stomach, moving it gently as if cradling something invisible, something I couldn't see but that he clearly felt. "What are you doing?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He continued in silence, cradling the invisible presence, until the house phone suddenly rang. The sound shattered the trance, and Hiro collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. His eyes returned to normal, and when he looked up at me, he seemed utterly confused. "What happened?" he asked, his voice shaking. I couldn't find the words to respond. The room felt charged with an unsettling energy, as if something or someone was still there, watching us. For weeks, I couldn't shake the memory of that night. Then, a month later, my wife gave me unexpected news. She was pregnant. I remembered how Hiro had touched my stomach, as if he had known before we did. The thought sent chills down my spine. I tried talking to Hiro about what had happened, but he avoided the subject. He claimed to remember nothing and insisted he didn't want to know. I didn't press him. There was something too disturbing about it all. The most unsettling part came later. I discovered that the house's previous owner had died suddenly 8 months earlier, in the same bedroom where Hiro's strange behavior occurred. The thought made my skin crawl. Since then, I've been unable to shake the feeling that some presence still lingers here, watching, waiting, claiming what it believes is rightfully its own. "This is my house." Those words still echo in my mind. When I moved into this house, I was seeking peace. The place had everything I needed: silence, space, and just enough distance from the chaos of the city. It was an old house with high ceilings and an air reminiscent of those classic horror films you see on TV. If I had known what awaited me, I would never have crossed that door. The first night passed uneventfully. I spent hours unpacking boxes and dusting off furniture when, just after midnight, someone knocked on the door. The sound was clear and deliberate, 3 firm knocks. Puzzled, I opened the door, not expecting visitors. In front of me stood a young woman. Her face was beautiful, though marred by exhaustion and something else I couldn't quite identify at the time. She wore a black spaghetti-strap dress, tight and worn, falling to her knees, with a weathered leather jacket over it. Her thin legs were clad in torn black tights, and her feet were tucked into heavy boots. Her dark brown hair fell in messy strands over her face, and a bold red lipstick stood out starkly against her pale skin. "Sorry to bother you so late," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Can I come in? My husband, he hit me, and I have nowhere else to go." I couldn't say no. Her split lip and the faint bruise on her left cheekbone erased any hesitation. I offered her the couch in the living room. She thanked me with a faint smile and settled in. I went to bed, uneasy but convinced I'd done the right thing. The next morning, when I woke up, she was gone. There was no trace of her. Not even the blanket I'd given her was out of place. I wondered how she'd left without me hearing, but I didn't dwell on it too much. Yet, that night, she came back. The same knocks on the door, just as firm, just as insistent. She was there again, this time with a black eye and chapped lips. Her outfit was nearly identical, though it seemed even more worn, as if she hadn't had the chance to change. I let her in once more. She sat on the couch, arms crossed as though shielding herself from something unseen. "I'm so sorry for bothering you," she said, staring at the floor. "I just need a safe place." I assured her it was fine and that she could stay as long as she needed. Yet deep down, I felt uneasy. There was something strange about her behavior. The way she never got too close, as if she didn't want to invade my space more than necessary. I went to bed, trying to ignore the nagging feeling. At dawn, she was gone again. This pattern repeated for 3 more nights. Each time she came, her appearance grew more disheveled, her injuries deeper. But what unsettled me the most was her silence. After her initial explanation, she barely spoke. She would just sit on the couch, staring at the floor, as though waiting for something that never arrived. By the 4th day, my curiosity turned into concern. I decided to find her husband and confront him. I asked the neighbors about her, but no one seemed to know who I was talking about. Some looked at me like I was crazy. Others simply ignored me. Desperate, I went to the police. I needed help. At the station, I explained everything to the officer on duty. He listened patiently, but when I mentioned the woman's name, Akane, his expression changed. It was clear he recognized the story. Slowly, he stood from his chair and rummaged through a dusty file cabinet. He pulled out an envelope containing several photos. "Is this the woman who's been coming to your house?" he asked, sliding a photo across the desk. A chill ran down my spine. Yes, it was her. The hair, the face, even the leather jacket, everything matched. "What's going on? Did you find her?" I asked, my voice tense with unease. The officer sighed and leaned toward me, his voice heavy with gravity. "That woman died a year ago. Her husband killed her in that house, strangled her, then fled. We never caught him, but she's dead." I sat there in stunned silence, unable to process what I'd just heard. It made no sense. I'd seen her. I'd spoken to her. Just last night, she'd been on my couch. "There must be some mistake," I insisted, though my voice wavered. The officer shook his head and pulled out another photo, this time of the inside of my house. It was the living room, my couch, but stained with dried blood. At that moment, a memory surfaced in my mind. The previous nights, there had always been a strange smell in the room, like dampness, but I'd never paid it much attention. That night, I returned home feeling trapped in a nightmare. When I entered, the air was icy. The couch was empty, but shadows seemed to shift in the dark corners of the living room. Suddenly, the knocking came again. 3 firm, insistent knocks. I didn't open the door. I couldn't. I stood frozen in the middle of the room as the knocks grew louder, more desperate. Then I heard her voice. "Please let me in. He's here." I still don't know if she meant her husband or something worse. I didn't open the door that night, or ever again. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, I still hear those 3 knocks, an echo of the past that refuses to fade away. Death is not the end, or at least, that's what I've come to believe over time. I'm not a philosopher or a spiritualist, but death and I have always been close, like old acquaintances who never quite lose touch. When I was just 6 years old, a fire claimed the lives of my cousins, Daniela and Camila. They lived with my grandparents in that enormous house that always smelled of dust and sadness. My cousins were the light of that somber home, but their deaths left my Aunt Irma trapped in a darkness she never escaped. After the fire, Aunt Irma insisted I live with her. "We'll keep each other company," she would say. I had lost my parents a year earlier in a car accident, and she had lost everything. Loneliness brought us together. We lived in a small house on the outskirts of town. It was quiet, but the silence was heavy, almost oppressive. Even so, I was grateful not to live in my grandparents' house anymore, a place I always felt was a void full of shadows. My grandfather Pedro was a terrible man, violent, cruel, and always accompanied by an aura of barely contained rage. My father used to say the house itself was a reflection of his character, cold, loveless, and full of dark corners where secrets and fears lurked. When my grandfather died, I was 13. They found him in his favorite armchair, the television still on, with an old black and white comedy flick flickering on the screen. Aunt Irma said he didn't look like a dead man, but rather someone deeply satisfied with himself. That damn smile of his, that smirk that seemed to mock the entire world, was frozen on his face. In time, we stopped talking about him. His memory was like an infected wound, best left untouched. But now we come to the part that keeps me awake at night. Years after my grandfather's death, my cousin Tomas was born. From the beginning, he was a peculiar child. By the time he was 2, he insisted we call him Pedro, as if his real name didn't belong to him. No one told him anything about our grandfather, not even that they shared a name. Tomas was different. Not in the way that makes children special, but in a way that unsettles you. He was cruel, deliberately so. Animals feared him. His schoolmates avoided him. Aunt Irma, though she would never admit it, was afraid of him. One day, I found him sitting in the living room armchair, chewing on a dry twig with that smile. That damn smile I remembered so vividly, even though it had been years since I'd last seen it. "What are you doing here in the dark, Tomas?" I asked, but he didn't answer. He just stared at me, chewing on the twig and smiling as if he knew something I didn't. After that day, the family began to talk. My grandmother claimed she heard Tomas talking to himself at night, sometimes even laughing. She said she occasionally saw shadows moving through the house when she knew everyone else was asleep. The breaking point came just a month ago. My grandmother woke up in the middle of the night, feeling someone's eyes on her. When she opened her eyes, she saw him. Tomas was standing in the doorway to her room, smiling. "Grandma," he said in a voice that wasn't his own, deeper, harsher. "You know who I am." She wanted to scream but couldn't. She could only watch as he nodded slowly before disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Since that night, my grandmother hasn't slept. Neither have I, because I've started to believe that death isn't always the end, that maybe some souls don't leave entirely, that maybe some come back, and not always with good intentions. I met her in a dark, cozy cafe where the shadows seemed to whisper secrets to each other. Amalia, a girl with jet black hair cascading to her waist, always dressed with impeccable Gothic style. That afternoon, she wore a fitted velvet corset in deep purple, paired with a long black lace skirt that brushed the floor with every step. Her tall boots, adorned with silver buckles, echoed on the cafe's wooden floor, and her neck was framed by a choker featuring a cameo that seemed to belong to another era. But what stood out the most were her eyes, large, deep, outlined with meticulous precision, shimmering with a mix of melancholy and mystery. Beside her sat her inseparable sister, Isabella, identical in every way, though with a darker aura. Where Amalia seemed introspective, Isabella was sharper, wielding a biting sense of humor as a shield. Both were gothic to their core, but there was something else about them, something that set them apart from everyone else in our circle. I didn't understand it at first, but soon I would discover their lives were intertwined with a tragedy far beyond imagination. It was during one of our conversations that they first told me about their mother. According to them, she was an obsessively protective woman, someone who never let them leave without ensuring they were safe. It's understandable, I suppose, Amalia said, stirring her tea slowly. But sometimes I feel she carries a pain that isn't ours. What do you mean? I asked, intrigued. Isabella chimed in, leaning her elbows on the table and fixing her gaze on me. We weren't always just us, you know? There were two others before. The confession left me stunned. They both looked at me with an unsettling calm, as if they were sharing a secret long locked away. Our mother had another set of twins, Amalia continued, her voice barely a whisper. They died years ago, run over by a truck. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to ask more, but something in their expressions told me not to push further. A few days later, Amalia invited me to accompany them to the cemetery. It was a place they visited often, and though I initially found it strange, I agreed. We arrived at sunset when the sky was painted in reddish hues and shadows began to stretch. Amalia and Isabella seemed entirely at ease in that setting. Amalia wore a black Victorian-style dress with long sleeves and a corset that accentuated her slender figure. Isabella, on the other hand, opted for something simpler, a black blouse with lace details and a leather skirt that reached her knees. Both wore wide-brimmed hats, giving them an ethereal, almost unreal air. We stopped in front of a weathered tombstone. I didn't need to ask to know it belonged to the first twins. Amalia knelt, placing a bouquet of black roses on the grave. Sometimes I feel like they're watching us, she said, breaking the silence. Isabella nodded. They're not just watching. They're here. I didn't know what to say. There was something in the way they spoke, a certainty I couldn't ignore. It all began a few weeks later. We were walking together through a park when Amalia stopped abruptly, gripping my arm tightly. Did you hear that? She asked, her face pale. Hear what? I replied, confused. The screeching brakes, she whispered. I hadn't heard anything, but Amalia was convinced she had. Isabella, walking a few steps ahead, turned with a worried expression. Again, she said, as if it were something familiar. I didn't understand what was happening, but I decided not to press the matter. However, that night, as I said goodbye to them, I saw something that froze me in place. Two figures, identical to Amalia and Isabella, reflected in a nearby window. The strange thing was that, though they were facing away from me, the figures in the glass were staring directly at me. It was during a nighttime visit to the cemetery that I finally began to understand what was happening. Amalia and Isabella were determined to confront whatever was tormenting them. We can't keep ignoring it, Amalia said as we walked among the graves. Our mother always wanted to protect us, but she can't protect us from them, Isabella added. They led me to the same gravestone we had visited before, but this time something was different. There were fresh marks in the dirt, as if someone had been digging recently. They're angry, Amalia whispered. They think we replaced them. Suddenly, the air grew icy. The shadows around us seemed to shift, and a faint sound, like screeching brakes, echoed in the distance. What do we do? I asked, fear creeping into my voice. We don't know, Isabella replied, her voice trembling. That night, something changed in them. Though we continued to see each other, there was a growing distance, an invisible barrier I couldn't cross. Eventually, they stopped responding to my messages, and when I went to find them, I discovered their house was empty. I never found out what happened to them. Sometimes I think about them. Their impeccable Gothic style, their dark secrets, and the tragedy that seemed to follow them. And every time I pass that cemetery, I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me from the shadows. Something that bears the faces of Amalia and Isabella, but isn't them. My name is Juan Ramirez, and what I'm about to share has haunted me for over 15 years. It happened during a family trip, a kind of celebration for my sister Isabel, who had just turned 15. We don't talk about what happened that night, but sometimes when I'm alone, the memories assault me as if it's all happening again. My mom was always a simple woman. She couldn't afford a big party, so she decided to take us on a trip. We were heading to Mazatlan, planning to enjoy the journey by stopping at small towns along the way. We set out early that morning, with my mom driving, my younger sister Sophia, our neighbor Daniel, and me. Everything seemed fine until night fell. Somewhere in Nayarit, the rain began, turning the road into a treacherous path. Then came the fog, so dense it was as if the world beyond it had ceased to exist. We could barely see a few meters ahead of the car. My mom decided to pull over by the roadside, but the trucks roaring past shook the car as if trying to topple it. We moved a bit further away from the road, but that only made things worse. The first thing we saw was a solitary cross by the path, small and white, like those placed where someone has died. Then another. And another. Dozens of crosses surrounded us. We realized we were in a graveyard. Isabel suggested we leave immediately, and we all agreed. Soon after, we saw something strange in the fog, a massive blue neon cross glowing in the distance. We assumed it belonged to a church, so we decided to follow it, hoping to find shelter for the night. But the more we drove, the farther away the cross seemed to be. It was as if it were leading us somewhere we didn't want to go. Then we saw him. A man walking along the roadside, hunched over, wearing worn-out clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that obscured his face. My mom rolled down the window and asked where the nearest town was. He pointed to an unmarked turnoff. "Go that way. You'll find it soon," he said in a raspy voice. We followed his directions. At first, the road was dark and desolate, but soon houses began to appear. It was an odd town. The cobblestone streets were brightly lit, despite it being nearly 3 in the morning. People were everywhere, walking, sitting on doorsteps, laughing. Everything felt old-fashioned, like a scene from another era. We asked for a place to stay, but the locals said the only hotel was full because of a celebration happening in town. Finally, we parked the car in front of a large plaza, right under a stone clock tower that dominated the center. The place felt strange, but at least it seemed safe. Isabel and I went out to find food. We came across a small stall, but the owner told us he was out of everything. "Go to the party," he suggested with an odd smile. We went back to ask my mom for permission, but she refused outright. "We're all staying together," she said firmly. Frustrated, we returned to the car. We rolled up the windows because the streets were crawling with cockroaches and earwigs. It was disgusting, but the townspeople didn't seem to notice. Isabel and I stayed awake, the heat inside the car unbearable. That stone clock seemed to slow with every passing minute. I checked the time, 3:45 a.m. When the sun rose, I woke everyone up. I didn't want to stay a second longer in that place. We left for the highway, but before continuing, I suggested we return to the town to grab breakfast. We drove back to the turnoff. But the village was gone. No houses, no streets, no people. Just the same dirt path leading into emptiness. We drove around the area searching for an explanation. We knew we weren't mistaken. We had been there. We had seen the people, spoken to them, slept beneath that clock. But now there was nothing. The silence in the car was suffocating. No one said a word, but we were all thinking the same thing. That wasn't a normal town. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if we had gone to that party. What secrets did those brightly lit streets hold in the middle of nowhere? Would we have returned or disappeared along with the village when dawn broke?
In the heart of mystery lies its dark secrets. The dolls have been there for long as anyone can remember, seated in the attic, their stillness mirroring a silent vigil. Their eyes, glinting in the dim light, maintain an uncanny stillness. They observe the path leading to the old gate, a gate that whispers tales of better days. The gate, with its rusted locks and worn-out wood, seems almost alive. It creaks with every gust, each groan echoing the solitude of the house. A path, lined with ancient trees, leads from the dwelling to the gate, a path rarely journeyed upon. Among the dolls, one stands out, the larger one, its face cracked like a weathered vase, subtly hinting at its age and the stories it holds. The absence of an eye adds to the eerie environment. It's as if it has seen so much that one eye wasn't enough to bear the weight. It's a sight that can chill the bravest of hearts, a sight that cannot be forgotten once seen. And what became of the large doll with the cracked face and the missing eye? Well, that's a story for another time. Regarding Lila, a crucial understanding dawned upon her that fateful evening. The foundation of her existence was shaken, her innocence replaced by wisdom. Life has elements meant to remain untouched, left pristine. Also exist doors in life's metaphorical house, the entryways to mysteries, which should stay sealed. Yet curiosity infiltrates and becomes a force to reckon with. Lila's world was altered. A sense of intrigue had always guided her, now mixed with apprehension. She confronted the unknown, which left a mark on her consciousness. Will she restrain her thirst for knowledge, or let herself be by the unknown? Her heart is drawn to the house. It's as if laughter from the house's hidden corners entice her. Mysterious eyes lurking in the shadows hold charm. Will she succumb to this attraction only to return to the house, drawn by strange phenomena in the darkness? Only time will tell. Picture yourself as a lone wanderer passing an ancient, decrepit house. This seemingly abandoned structure, shrouded in years of dust, whispers tales of a complex past. Pause and absorb this sight. The damaged door, the broken windows, the twisted tree, all echo stories too intricate to fathom. Stand there letting the silence and the scent of decayed memories reach out to you. Now, imagine a compelling curiosity drawing you in. The house, desolate as it appears, holds an irresistible allure. Its silence, the cryptic messages of its past dwellers, all invite you inside. Yet heed this, the thrill of the unknown is enticing. The secrets of the house, waiting to be discovered, seem captivating. But prepare for the unexpected. What lies within may not be as harmless as it seems. So we depart from the quaint home nestled in Eldridge Village, holding its unique dolls. Their tea party forever suspended. The dolls, silent in their shadowy home, their eyes filled with unsaid tales. Ever pondered what would happen when the rusty gate creaks open for a guest, or when a brave soul, driven by curiosity, ventures into the unknown? The wind whispers, the leaves rustle, they carry secrets, each one more captivating than the last. However, that, dear listener, is a tale for another time. Until we meet again, may your sleep be peaceful, devoid of disruptions. Always remember, not all that glimmers under the moonlight means well. Some ghosts are better left alone. Good night, my friends. May your dreams be sweet and untroubled. Before we end this haunting tale, we hope you found intrigue in the shadows and mystery in the silence. If our story has sent shivers down your spine, if the enigmatic eyes of the Eldridge dolls have lingered in your mind, then we've done our job. We draw our curtains here, but the stage remains set for countless more tales to unfold. If you're brave enough to join us on these eerie adventures, then don't forget to like our video and subscribe to our channel. We promise, the mystery deepens, the whispers grow louder, and the shadows grow darker. So stay tuned, dear listeners, for more spine-chilling tales from the unknown. Good night, and remember, the dolls are watching. They always are. With their glassy eyes and painted smiles. Sweet dreams, my friends.